You are sitting on a slab of cold stone in a long row of holes, shoulder to shoulder, with about 19 strangers you have never met. Nobody is making eye contact. Nobody is talking about it. And when you finish, your only option for cleaning yourself is a sea sponge tied to the end of a stick. A sponge that, by the way, has already visited the backsides of roughly 30 other people today. Welcome to the average Roman public toilet. And honestly, the shared sponge is the least disturbing thing that's about to happen to you in here, because here's what nobody tells you about the glorious Roman Empire. Going to the bathroom could, on a genuinely bad day, set you on fire. I'm not being dramatic. There are records of flames shooting up out of the toilet. There's a goddess whose entire job was the sewer, and people painted a second goddess on the bathroom wall, basically as a good luck charm, so they'd survive the trip. And the real punchline, the thing I'm saving for the end, is that the Romans built some of the most brilliant sanitation engineering in the ancient world, plumbing that we still admire 2,000 years later, and it made them sicker, not healthier, sicker. And the prime suspect is a sauce they absolutely loved. We'll get there. So let's start with the part that breaks the modern brain first, the lack of walls. When you walk into a Roman forica, a public latrine, you are not walking into a room full of private little stalls. You are walking into what looks like a stone bench running along the walls, with keyhole-shaped holes cut into it at regular intervals, sometimes 20, 30, even 50 of them in the fancier cities. No partitions, no doors, no awkward little gap under the stall that you pretend doesn't exist. Just an open room and a bunch of Roman citizens sitting in a row, doing their business, fully visible, fully relaxed. And here's the part that really gets me. They liked it. This was a social space. People sat there and chatted. They talked politics. They gossiped. They complained about their landlords. Archaeologists think business deals were struck in there. You might be mid-sentence, negotiating the price of olive oil with a man whose name you just learned, while both of you are very much occupied. To a Roman, doing this alone, in silence, behind a locked door, the way you and I do it, would have seemed a little sad, a little antisocial. You weird, lonely modern person. Some of these latrines were genuinely nice too. We're talking marble seats in the wealthier towns, mosaics on the floor, fountains in the middle, frescoes on the walls. There's a reason for one of those wall decorations, and it's a dark one, but hold that thought. I promised you a flaming toilet, and I intend to deliver. First, the sponge. Because you're still thinking about the sponge. I know you are. It had a name. The Romans called it a tersorium, or a xylospongium, which is just Greek for a sponge on a stick, and credit to them for not overcomplicating the branding. It was a natural sea sponge fixed to a wooden handle. After you used it, you rinsed it in a little channel of running water that flowed right in front of the seats, sometimes with a splash of vinegar or salt added, which was their version of disinfectant, and then you put it back for the next person. Yes, the same sponge, shared, communal, a toilet utensil with the social life of a library book. Now, in fairness, historians do argue about this one. Some think each latrine had a single shared sponge for the crowd. Others suspect wealthier Romans brought their own, the way you might bring your own pen to avoid the office germs. And a few think the sponge was mainly for cleaning the seat, not the person. But the most famous Roman reference we have makes it pretty clear these things were used on bodies, and we'll get to that reference, because it is one of the most disturbing stories to ever come out of antiquity, and it involves this exact stick. But before the horror, let me show you why the Romans actually deserved to be smug about their plumbing. Because they were. They were so proud of this. Underneath the city of Rome ran something called the Cloaca Maxima. The name literally means the greatest sewer, which is the most Roman thing imaginable, naming your sewer like it's a war monument. It was built around the 6th century before the Common Era under the old Etruscan kings, originally just to drain the swampy, soggy ground around what would become the Roman Forum. Over the centuries, it grew into this enormous network of stone-vaulted tunnels carrying waste straight out to the river Tiber. And when I say enormous, I mean, parts of it were big enough to row a boat through. People reportedly did. There are accounts of officials inspecting the sewers by boat. 2,500 years later, parts of the Cloaca Maxima are still standing, still connected to Rome's drainage. Your bathroom renovation will not last 15 years. Theirs is going on its third millennium. They piped in water from the aqueducts to flush the public toilets and the baths, and the runoff would wash through the latrine channels and carry everything down into the sewer. They had running water, drainage, public restrooms, and a goddess to bless the whole operation. Genuinely impressive. So impressive that you'd assume they had this completely figured out. Now, quick pause, because this is the natural turning point in the story, where we go from admiring the Romans to feeling sorry for them. If you're sitting there equally horrified and fascinated, hooked on this weird, gross, genius corner of history that your textbook skipped, that's exactly the stuff I dig up on this channel. So go ahead and follow along, because the second half of this video has the real twist, the part where I tell you what the brilliant plumbing was secretly doing to their bodies and the unbelievable food they were eating that made it worse. You do not want to miss the sauce. Trust me on the sauce. Okay, back to the flaming toilet, as promised. Here's the problem with connecting every toilet directly to a giant enclosed sewer. That sewer is a closed, dark, warm tunnel full of decomposing waste, and decomposing waste produces gas, specifically methane and hydrogen sulfide. Methane is flammable, very flammable, and these gases would build up down in the tunnels with nowhere convenient to go except up through the holes, into the latrine, where people were sitting. So every now and then, the gas concentration would hit just the right level, meet a spark or an open flame, because remember, this is a world lit by oil lamps and torches, and the toilet would, in the most literal sense available to language, blow up. Flames could erupt right out of the seat openings. Imagine the worst possible moment for an open flame to appear, and that is the moment we are describing. People got burned by the toilet from below, and the methane wasn't even the only thing coming up from underground. The sewers were full of life, rats, obviously, but also other creatures that liked dark, wet tunnels, and they would climb up through the pipes and emerge into the latrine, occasionally biting the exposed and frankly defenseless backside of whoever happened to be sitting there. Imagine the social contract of that crowded latrine. You're sitting in a row of 20 people, calmly discussing the price of grain, and the man 4 seats down suddenly screams and leaps into the air because something with teeth just introduced itself. So now, finally, that wall decoration makes sense. Remember the frescoes I mentioned? A lot of Roman toilets had a painting of Fortuna, the goddess of luck and chance, right there on the wall. Think about what that tells you. You don't put the goddess of luck somewhere unless you feel like you need luck to get through it. They literally treated the bathroom as a place where you might need divine intervention to come out alive and unbitten. Some Romans went further and scratched protective spells and little magical inscriptions near the latrines to ward off the demons they believed lurked down in the darkness of the drains. They genuinely thought there were creatures, spirits, evil things living in the sewer, waiting. And given the rats and the surprise fireballs, can you really blame them? That fear was, in its own way, completely rational. And the Romans had a goddess for the sewer itself, too. Her name was Cloacina, the spirit of the Cloaca Maxima, and over time she got merged with Venus, the goddess of love, into a single figure called Venus Cloacina. Sit with that combination for a second. The goddess of love and beauty and the goddess of the sewer fused into one deity, with her own shrine standing in the Roman Forum, the most important public square in the entire empire. They were, you have to admit, fully committed to the bit. Now I owe you that story, the one about the stick. And I want to warn you, the comedy takes a hard left turn here, because this is the moment the Roman toilet stops being funny and becomes genuinely haunting. We know about it from Seneca, the famous Roman philosopher, in one of his letters. He tells the story of a Germanic prisoner who was being held to fight in the arena, one of those spectacles where condemned men were sent out to be killed by wild beasts for the entertainment of the crowd. This man did not want to die that way as a piece of entertainment on someone else's schedule. So, while he was alone, preparing in a room with a latrine, he took the sponge on a stick, the toilet sponge, the dirtiest object in the building, and he forced it down his own throat and choked himself to death. He chose the most degrading object in the Roman world as his way out, rather than give the crowd its show. Seneca tells this story with something close to admiration. His point was about freedom and the human will, how a person with nothing left can still choose their own end. But for us, 2,000 years later, the detail that survives, the thing that makes it land like a punch, is what the object was. The same humble stick we were joking about a minute ago. History does that. It hands you a punchline and a tragedy wrapped in the exact same object. All right, deep breath. Let's lighten this back up, because the Romans have one more habit that is going to restore your faith in just how strange these people were. Let's talk about pee, specifically the Roman pee economy, because they did not flush it away. They collected it on purpose because it was valuable. See, human urine is rich in ammonia, and ammonia is a fantastic cleaning agent. So Romans would urinate into pots placed on street corners and in public urinals, and these pots got collected and sold. The main customers were the fullers, the people who cleaned and processed clothing. To whiten a wool toga, they would soak it in vats of stale urine and then have workers stomp on it with their bare feet, like a horrible, pungent version of stomping grapes for wine. The ammonia cut through the grease and brightened the fabric, so that gleaming white toga on a proud Roman senator, aged urine. The whiter the toga, the more of it, and it gets better. There's good evidence that some Romans used urine as a mouthwash and a tooth whitener. They believed it kept the teeth bright and the gums firm. So somewhere in ancient Rome, there was a man with a dazzling smile and a spotless white toga, and both of those things were achieved with the exact same ingredient. And I will let you finish that thought on your own. Now, where there is a thriving industry, there is a government that wants its cut. Enter the Emperor Vespasian, who slapped a tax on the urine trade. His own son Titus thought this was beneath the dignity of an emperor, taxing pee. Vespasian, the story goes, held up a coin from the urine tax, told his son to take a good sniff, and asked whether it smelled bad. Titus said no. And Vespasian replied, and yet it comes from urine. That gave us the Latin phrase pecunia non olet, money does not stink, which people still quote today when they want to justify making money in a slightly distasteful way. And the tribute does not end there. To this very day, public urinals in Italy are still nicknamed Vespasiani. The man is, eternally, the emperor of pee, so let's take stock. The Romans had public sewers, running water, communal toilets, urine recycling, a sewer goddess, and the engineering confidence of a civilization that names its drainage like a battlefield. They were, by any reasonable measure, the most sanitation-obsessed people of the ancient world. Which brings us, finally, to the question I planted at the very beginning. Did all of it actually work? Did all this brilliant plumbing make the Romans healthier? And here is the twist. The answer is no. If anything, it made them worse. In 2016, a researcher at the University of Cambridge named Piers Mitchell pulled together the archaeological evidence, the parasites and the worm eggs preserved in ancient Roman latrines, in old cesspits, in fossilized human waste from across the empire, and by every modern expectation, the rate of those gut parasites should have dropped once the Romans rolled in with their toilets and their bathhouses and their clean water. Fewer parasites. Healthier guts. That's the logical prediction. Instead, the parasites went up. Things like whipworm and roundworm, the nasty intestinal infections spread by contact with human waste, did not retreat during the Roman period. They gradually became more common as Roman culture spread across Europe, compared to the simpler Iron Age that came before all the fancy plumbing. The Romans conquered the known world, brought their sanitation everywhere they went, and seemed to have carried the worms right along with the aqueducts. Why? A few reasons, and they're almost poetic in how they backfire. That communal sponge we keep coming back to, passed from person to person, was a beautiful little delivery service for parasites. The Romans also liked to collect human waste from the cities and use it to fertilize the crops in the fields, which sounds efficient and eco-friendly until you realize you are spreading the eggs of intestinal worms directly onto the food you are about to eat, and those warm, beloved public baths where everyone soaked together. The water often wasn't changed nearly often enough. A nice, warm, communal soup of everybody's day. Relaxing. Also, biologically, a problem. But the strangest culprit of all, the one I made you wait the entire video for, is the sauce. The Romans were obsessed with a fermented fish sauce called garum. They put it on everything. The way we reach for ketchup or soy sauce. It was made by letting fish guts ferment, and it was so popular it was shipped in jars to every corner of the empire, and along with it, the data suggests, traveled fish tapeworm. As garum spread across the Roman world as a trade good, the fish tapeworm appears to have spread right with it, showing up more widely than in the ages before. So the Romans built temples to their sewer goddess, engineered drains that still work today, and then casually doused their dinner in a sauce that was quietly seeding their intestines. Their favorite flavor was working against their own plumbing. And the deepest irony, the one that ties the whole thing together, is this. The Romans had the engineering, but they did not have the idea of germs. Nobody on Earth would understand for another 1700 years that disease spreads through tiny invisible organisms. So the Romans did everything by instinct, by smell, by the very reasonable logic that filth is unpleasant and should be carried away. And they were right that it should. They just had no way of knowing that a shared sponge, a field fertilized with waste, a shared bath, and a beloved fish sauce were undoing a good chunk of their own brilliant work. They built cathedrals of stone for their sewage and still lived shoulder to shoulder with the worms. So the next time you are sitting alone in a private room with a locked door, a fresh roll of paper, and water that gets flushed away and never, ever comes back to visit you, take a quiet moment to appreciate it. Because a Roman would look at your lonely, silent, single-occupancy bathroom and feel a little sorry for you, and you would look at his flaming, rat-infested, sponge-sharing, urine-taxing social toilet and realize that, of the two of you, you are unmistakably, gloriously the winner. No goddess of luck required.